That's how they faked the moon rocks. One moon rock, though, I talked about this, was opened from a hermetically sealed container, and it was proved to be a fake. So this is a rock that Neil Armstrong said out of his own mouth he personally picked up, put in his pocket, and gave to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. They put it in a hermetically sealed box. My film comes out. The curator's curious. He opens it up, puts it under a microscope, and it's petrified wood. So no reporter, even though they did a story, moon rock proves to be fake. Comment from NASA, no comment. Okay, so the moon rocks are fake. What about the moon mission? No one asked that. The Washington Post does a story. Isn't it interesting? On the 25th anniversary or whatever it was, some people don't believe we go to the moon. They call me up, do an interview, watch my movie. And I'm like, okay, did you see the footage of them faking being halfway to the moon? Yeah. What do you got to say about that? Well, it looks like they're faking being halfway to the moon. Yeah, how about that? And I said, why don't you do a story about how, well, maybe they really did fake the moon landing? He says, if I did that, I would be fired.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Sensible Hippie podcast, and I'm your host, the Sensible Hippie. Before we begin today, I want to emphasize the following discussion diverges from the conventional narrative of the moon landing. We encourage listeners to approach this conversation with an open mind. Today, we are taking a giant leap into the realms of space controversy. Our guest is the author of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, Bart Sibrel, a man who challenges what many of us have accepted as truth. But before we begin, and before we bring Bart into the conversation, I want to take a moment to thank all of you, my amazing listeners, for your continued support. Your reviews and your follows mean the world to me, and it helps keep this show growing. So if you haven't already done so, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a positive review. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Bart Sibrel. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the Sensible Hippie podcast. I really appreciate your time.
No problem.
I want to ask you, what sparked your initial curiosity about the moon landings and what led you to question their authenticity?
Well, I grew up believing that the moon landings were real, like everybody else, and probably more so. In that my father was in the Air Force, and so I grew up around aviation and airplanes. And when the alleged moon landing took place, I was just 4 years old, asleep in bed. However, my father, being an officer in the Air Force, he got like a VIP publicity package of about 29 by 12 color prints of the alleged first moon mission. And he gave them to me, and I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. And I put them up on my wall all in a row. I don't know what that would be, 4 by 5. And we moved every couple of years. So wherever bedroom I went to, that was what I put up. All the pictures of the moon landing everywhere I went. So from like the age of 4 to 14, if I just saw them once a day, that would be looking at the pictures 3,650 times. But I probably saw them 2, 3, or 4 times a day. So I saw these pictures 10,000 or more times, believing they were on the moon, and had a shrine to the moon landing in every bedroom that I went from house to house. And then when I'm 14, I watched a television program with a gentleman who worked for NASA, and he had very high security clearance, so second only to von Braun. And he would edit memos going from the Pentagon to von Braun because English was not his native language. And he read a letter from von Braun to the Pentagon warning them that they're not going to make Kennedy's deadline. And if they try, there's, a 99.99% chance they're going to kill the crew on live TV. So he said, kind of like in poker, the interesting thing about poker is you can win with a bad hand, right? All you got to do is pretend you have a good hand. And so they bluffed and they fooled the world. And believe it or not, it was actually easy to do. People say it must be real because hundreds of thousands of people were involved, but that's not the case because the flight director, Eugene Krantz, said that a person in the heart of command center at one of those consoles can't tell any difference between a real flight and a practice simulation. It's just a bunch of numbers going by on the screen that are identical. They don't know. So if a person in the command center can't tell the difference between a fake flight and a real one, how can you, seeing it at home in your living room as a child? And the atomic bomb was built with, I think, 129,500 people were involved. And yet only 8 people knew what they were building. And that's like saying what a bank teller knows about the corruption in the bank and the CEO knows are identical. They're completely different. And once the rocket goes up, there's no independent press coverage. Like World War II was in front of billions of eyewitnesses. This only has 3 eyewitnesses, all ex-military, sworn to secrecy, and no independent press coverage. So we have to assume that Richard Nixon is telling the truth, you see? And then it's a lie that people wanted to believe, you see? And so when I'm 14 years old and that I hear this on television, well, I'm an open-minded 14-year-old. And rather than being offended, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Never thought about that. So I immediately go to the bedroom wall and I start looking at the pictures. And in the original prints, if you can find them, the soil of the alleged surface of the moon is a caramel brown because that's the real color. It only looks washed out from looking at it from Earth. So the Chinese probes from a few years ago, their soil on the lunar surface is caramel brown. That's what it is. But the backdrops, which were fake, were grayish blue. So when you see the original prints, you see this straight line going left to right horizontally between the fake backdrop and the real soil. I'm like, oh, that looks like a fake backdrop. And now they've color corrected them so that the soil is grayish blue to match the fake backgrounds. But that's not the color of the moon's surface. Just look at the Chinese probes and look at the original pictures. And how did the color change of the moon's surface since, 1969? But apparently it has in pictures. So why would they touch up the pictures to match the background if they really went to the moon, you see? And so that kind of planted a seed in my mind at age 14. So we go another 10 years forward, I'm 24, and I'd become a professional filmmaker whose job is to make fake scenes look real. And I can even tell you what kind of lighting they used, electrical lighting. And if people just go to my website, sibrel.com, they can see a 3-minute video where I show a picture in sunlight where shadows are parallel. I mean, go outside, 2 people, 2 telephone poles, 2 trees on a cloudless day, you'll see the shadows, no matter what time of day, they run parallel. It's impossible for them to intersect if it's sunlight. But we have a picture, many of them from the alleged moon missions, where shadows are intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. You can't do that in sunlight, which means it's electrical light, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. And you could prove that in a court of law. Just take the jury outside, show them parallel shadows, come inside, turn off the lights, bring in a spotlight, and have one person stand in front of the spotlight, one person to the side, and you'll see the shadows will intersect, which meaning the pictures were taken with electrical light. There you go. You can prove the moon landings were fake with one picture legally in a court of law. That's it. It's over. It can't be duplicated in sunlight. It can only be duplicated with an electrical light, which means they faked it. It's that simple. And so, as serendipity would have it, one day I'm editing a film for the guy who produced the show I saw 10 years earlier as a 14-year-old. And I'm like, who was that guy in your show who said we didn't go to the moon? And he put me in touch with him. And naturally, being a filmmaker, this man, Bill Casey, said, hey, Bart, you should make a film about how we didn't go to the moon. And I'm like, well, let me think about it. And I start looking into it. Well, I've got the shadows intersecting and the background and the foreground doesn't match. And then I've got 2 of the 3 astronauts on the first mission who refused to talk about it. I mean, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Only one of the 3 will ever give an interview unless the president asks them to. And then the administrator of NASA, who was about to have this great, reputation. I'm the guy who helped put men on the moon. He resigns days before the first mission, didn't have anything to do with it. Then you have the Soviets who launched the first satellite, the first animal, the first man, the first woman, the first spacewalk, the first crew of 3. And I'm like, but they never went to the moon. And so I'm like, just something doesn't smell right about this. And then I thought, I've always liked puzzles. I used to draw mazes as a child that adults had problems doing. And I'm kind of have a relentless, never give up personality. I don't know if you all believe in God, but not too long ago, I'm struggling with, quitting drinking. Let's just be honest. And I was like, throw away my beer, and I buy more, throw it away, buy more. It's like, oh, Lord, help me. And then I asked him, well, why do you put up with me, God? Why? Why do you put up with me? I would smite me a long time ago and be done. And he kind of talks to me in my mind, and he said, because you always, it's that saying, you've heard it, fall off the horse, get back on. He says, that's you, Bart. You fail, but you keep trying. That's why I love you. And I know that about me. I know that I hate to lose. I hate to give up. I hate to not accomplish something. I don't care if it's a leaky roof and I try this and won't work, try this and won't work. I can try 100 things and it won't work. And I will try the 101st thing until that roof stops leaking. So knowing that about myself, knowing that I like puzzles, I said, if anybody could figure out whether we went to the moon or not, it might be me. However, if they did not go and I start overturning these rocks, that could be dangerous. So I thought, do I really want to risk my life for what Richard Nixon did in 1969? No, I don't think so. So I call up Bill Case and I said, no, I don't think so. I'm going to have to pass. I want to have a wife and family someday. I'm not going to risk my life for what Nixon did. However, 5 years go by. And during that time, I had another client who was this famous Christian musician. And they said that they would get one of my scripts to a famous Hollywood producer if I did them a favor. And I'm like, oh, what favor? And they said, read the Bible. So I got this 1 year Bible, dividing it into 365 calendar days. I started June 3rd, 1989, the day the man stood in front of the tanks in China to protest. And over the next 5 years, I read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover. Now, I wasn't a Christian by any means, but it did convince me that there is a battle between right and wrong. I mean, obviously, murder, rape, and stealing is wrong. Come on. Okay? I mean, how long are we going to fudge what right and wrong is? And there's truth and lies. And the wicked people use lies to cover their tracks. And there's light and darkness. And the Bible talks about this all the time. It even says in the last days, what was previously evil will be called good, and what was previously good will be called evil. That's pretty sad, isn't it? And I realized this is a spiritual message. This is mankind's greatest accomplishment, the boast. And if you go to Sibrel.com, you'll see a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, my film, that opens up with the Tower of Babel, which the Bible says was built just to boast, the tallest building, never finished. The Titanic, the ship that God himself cannot sink. We know what happened there. And then Richard Nixon, talking to them by telephone, must have had a long extension cord, to the moon, even though my cell phone doesn't work half the time. I wish I had his phone today. He said, knowing they were not on the moon, putting a man on the moon is the greatest event since God made the universe. And I said to myself, if they faked it, I didn't know for sure. That's more profound than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? Either they went, they planted a flag, came back, boy, that was a close one, didn't get killed. Amen. Or they lied to the whole world, and not just anybody, the great United States of America, the country that all the immigrants want to come to be free. That government that claims they're the bastion of light and truth and democracy, that government lied to their people, lied to the world, embezzled $200 billion, put it on coins. Get a 50-cent piece from the early 70s. It has men on the moon on the back, stamps, encyclopedias taught in every university in America. People who say the truth are ridiculed. They gave them medals of honor for being such good liars. If that's true, and it is, that's so much more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. And I realized the world needs to know this. This is like a cure for cancer. We can't move on. Like, I'm, trying to have a happy marriage and I make mistakes all the time. If I keep making the same mistake over and over and over and over and over again, I'll never have a happy marriage. I need to overcome. And if mankind continues to believe that men are on the moon and those, which means those same criminals are still in power, we will not make any progress. In fact, it'll get worse. And I realize I'm going to die anyway. So I might as well go out in a blaze of glory. I might as well die for what is right. So I changed my mind. 5 years later, call up Bill Casey, and I changed my mind. Well, shortly after that, serendipity would have it, I meet a millionaire who builds rockets for NASA, who knows the moon missions are fake. And he says it's his patriotic duty to expose it. He wishes to remain anonymous so the stock won't go down. Gives me $1 million to produce a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, and astronauts gone wild. And lo and behold, 3.5 years into a 7-year project, I find classified footage of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes with a third track of audio of the CIA telling them how to do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. Oh no. And I'm just weep quietly. I'm like, boy, how sad. How sad. And then I call it Bill Casey, frantic. Bill, they really didn't go to the moon. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't understand. They really didn't go. It's like, well, Bart, I told you. And from that day forward, if you get my book, you can see that, I was that night followed from church, harassed, my car was disabled, chased on foot because I had a copy of them faking part of the moon mission right in front of your eyes. And one of the chapters is a funny thing happened on the way to CNN, where, CIA type of, they were trying to stop me from getting this tape broadcast that even the director of NBC News agreed. It proved that they didn't go to the moon. So thank you, Maya, for the big introduction, and I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I read your book. I
Mia,
also
Mia,
have
I got it
Mia.
wrong,
Yes,
right?
it's
Mia,
okay. Yep, Mia.
once you learn it the wrong way, it's hard to go back.
I know.
It's like the moon landing.
Yeah. Oh, so I read your book, and I also have the audio of you reading the book, which is really great. I did read that part where you had somebody following you. That must have been terrifying. I can't believe that they went through all that to stop you or try to stop you.
Oh yeah, I mean, this would be a great embarrassment to the world. I was working as a journalist at NBC and an editor, and the news director practically fainted when he saw the tape. And he's like, oh my gosh, they really faked the moon landing. I said, yeah, I know. This is a big story. What do we do? And he thought about it, and said, I can't broadcast this. I will not go down in history as the man who caused the next Civil War. And I'm like, let me make sure I understand this. If we show the public how corrupt the federal government is, it'll bring down the corrupt federal government. That's what you're afraid of. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? Isn't that what our job is? And so 10 years go by, another news director sees the tape and said, we're going to broadcast this nationwide. They fly me to New York, put me up in the Waldorf Astoria, pay me thousands of dollars for the exclusive license to broadcast this footage I uncovered. They get a call from the federal government threatening them to pull their plug, and they back down and don't broadcast it. And even Fox News called me up about a year ago. Basically, what happened is, what was it? The former Russian space director, retired, publicly said the moon landings are fake. So the next day, Fox News calls me up, says we're going to do an hour-long special about the moon landing, whether they're real or not. And they said, we just want to be honest with you. We haven't read your book. We haven't seen your films. And regardless, we will conclude that the moon landings are real. I thought these were investigative journalists. I thought Fox News was looking out for you. I thought they were the bastion of truth, light, and liberty and against corruption. And they said, without investigating it, that their point of the program was to reassure people that the moon missions were fake. And get this, during the program, they found one scientist in 1969 who said, "Congratulations." And that was the proof that the Russians believed we went to the moon. They failed to mention weeks earlier, the former director of the Russian Space Agency said the moon missions were fake, which was the whole reason why the show was produced. They don't mention that. This is Fox News. So I think Fox News has been bought out by somebody who is masquerading as, anti-establishment, right? Because if the truth comes out that the moon missions are fake, I don't think that people will ever trust the federal government ever again. And they're trying so hard to make sure that doesn't happen. Unfortunately for them, I think the finger came out of the dike in November, where there was this AI conference. And it was all the world leaders, the latest, greatest AI technology. And just like a car show, they have the car that goes 150 miles per gallon that somehow never makes it to the marketplace in 20 years, but you can drive it around the track for that weekend if you want. So they let people, various teams, play with Google's latest AI, a network of AIs together called the neural network. Not available to the public, but they let them play around with it for a few days. One team had it write a symphony, another write a novel, and one team fed it information into its specialized deep fake detector program that can tell you in 1 second whether a video of Biden or Trump is really them. And it's never been wrong. So they feed it pictures from the probes from China of the lunar surface from a couple of years ago, and it says these are real. And then, in comparison, they feed them pictures from the Apollo missions from the Nixon administration. And it goes ding, 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 fake background, fake foreground, fake this, fake that. The smartest computer in the whole world just said the pictures from the Nixon administration of the surface of the moon were filmed in a television studio. That's what it said with 100% certainty, right? Not on Fox News, not on RT. You see what I'm saying? They're desperate, but I think it's too late. It still got out. And now what are they going to do? You see, you type in moon landing fraud, or whatever you want to type in, and the first thing that comes out is the earth is flat, or we really went to the moon, anything to prop up the moon landing. Now, if they really went to the moon, then anyone who says otherwise is an idiot. You don't spend millions of hours and thousands of videos producing programs to reassure people that Mickey Mouse was not the first president of the United States, right? It was George Washington. You don't make thousands of videos, one after another and line them up in a Google search engine to reassure people. People are saying Mickey Mouse was the first president. We have to produce this to convince people. If they really went to the moon, why would they care, right? So the fact that they have to so prop this up is proof also that they didn't go. Just like them destroying all of the original hardware, all of the original blueprints, all of the original telemetry data as to where the rocket really was, all of the original videotapes. NASA says out of their own mouth, they destroyed them intentionally, which you would never do if you really went to the moon at a cost of $200 billion. But that's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. I mean, so that's indirect proof right there. So is a recording that I found of an astronaut plotting to have me killed by the CIA on tape. It's one of the clips in the book. The book has 17 interactive video clips at Sibrel.com. That's indirect proof. But the direct proof are the shadows intersecting. The direct proof is this footage of them faking being halfway to the moon. The direct proof is that you cannot have better technology in the past and in the future. That's scientifically impossible. Today, they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon with an astronaut, and yet with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they went 1,000 times farther than they can go today with 5 decades better technology. You cannot have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than today, which means they bluffed. That's proof. And then, as you know, we have an eyewitness who saw them film Apollo 11 at his Air Force base June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968, who confessed to it while he was dying. That's an eyewitness. I think that's pretty strong evidence. So we have 4 times the evidence that you need to know that the moon missions are fake. But if people want this candy, it's different. It's a different lie. Who killed JFK? He's still dead. Who did 9/11? All those people are still dead. This is different. This is a positive lie. This is glory and honor and pride, and it's candy. I did an interview with Glenn Beck, and he's ridiculing me, and then he has on an astronaut who has the audacity to say he's a Christian and lying about walking on the moon, kissing the guy's feet for an hour when he's accessory to multiple homicides. And in Glenn Beck's mind, I know America has gotten bad, but at least we went to the moon. You see? And they're trying so hard because right after the Russian cosmonaut said that the moon missions were fake, Russian space director, they have an astronaut on Glenn Beck to reassure his audience. You see how clever they are? To reassure them, no, 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 they're real. Why would they care? Why would they spend so much effort to reassure people of the obvious if they really went? Back to
Why
you.
do you, why do you think we faked the moon landing in the first place? Do you think it's because we needed to show that we're more powerful than the Russians, that we're better than the Russians, or
Well, the real answer to why did they do it is there is no reason. There's no reason. Why did you slit that person's throat who you hated? Well, there is no reason. Now, the murderer has a reason. Well, I hated them. Well, their dog pooped on my front porch. Well, they took my mail, whatever, whatever, whatever. You see, murderers have a reason why they kill, and thieves have a reason why they stole. And liars have a reason why they don't tell the truth. There is no reason for them faking the moon landing. Or you could say the real reason is because they're arrogant, murderous, lying, thieving criminals. That's the reason why they did it. Why, when Bill Clinton was asked, why did you have that affair? When he finally admitted to it, only after he got caught. He'll admit to it after he got caught, but not before. Oh, okay. And then they said, well, why did you do it? You know what he said? He said, because I could, meaning because I could get away with it, so I did it. Well, why did they fake the moon landing? Because they could. That's how bad they are. Now, you probably know, right? That Eisenhower's famous farewell address. So the guy's president for 8 years, and his last day in office, he says something he's afraid to say or do anything about for 8 years. He warns America corrupt powers are taking over the federal government. Have a nice day. Goodbye. He's so afraid he's going to be killed by them if he does anything about it for 8 years, but he wants to warn us on his last day in office, right? And then have a nice retirement without getting killed. Then the next guy tries to do something about it and they kill him, right? His own nephew, who has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone does, says he was killed by the CIA. The federal government killed their own duly elected president. I think that's election interference by the American federal government, don't you think? So if Bobby Kennedy Jr. says his uncle was killed by the CIA, I think he knows what he's talking about. I believe him. And then Robert McNamara, who was defense secretary during the Vietnam War, that the public was not interested in supporting. Just like on December 6, 1941, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II. After Pearl Harbor, 90% were for it. Oh, that worked out nicely. So they said, Robert McNamara and the CIA got together and said, how can we get the public interested in joining the Vietnam War that we all want to do? And they said, well, we need like a Pearl Harbor type of incident. So they got together and they falsified, not my opinion, Robert McNamara said it himself before he died. We falsified an attack from a North Vietnamese ship on an American ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress passed a law called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution based on something that never happened. It led to the death of 3 million people, including 58,220 American citizens. So if the CIA is willing to kill their own president, If the CIA is willing to kill 58,220 of their own people, I don't think they're going to have a problem with faking an image of the moon on television. But people want to believe the glorious lie. Kennedy's a tragedy. 9/11 is a tragedy. It's just a matter of changing names on who did it and why. This is different. This is taking away that candy that they're clinging to and giving them manure. Wake up. You know what I mean? And so people are Glenn Beck, who claims he's anti-government corruption, is defending the criminals. That's how deep this is ingrained in people. As you know from the book, I met a college professor, showed him all this information, why the moon landings are fake. He says, I'll never recant the glorious moon landings. And then I said, okay, what if you saw Buzz Aldrin on national TV tearfully confessing, I'm so sorry, I faked the moon landings. Please forgive me. The man said that he would still believe he walked on the moon anyway. You see that? What does it say about pride? Pride comes before a fall. Pride God opposes. What is pride? Pride is simply the unwillingness to be wrong. And humility is the willingness to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time and I love it. I went to a church once that had an answer for everything, even if it was the wrong answer, but they had to have an answer. They said, who likes to be wrong? I'm the only one raising my hand or wanting to. And they're like, well, why? So because number one, I'm not walking around in error. And number two, I'm learning something new. People, it's like they won't take back what they've said. They won't admit that they're wrong. I don't know what the problem is. I admit I'm wrong at least 5 to 10 times every day. You know, I don't know. But anyway, Mia, did I say it right this time?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes, you did. Well, so considering the significant advancements in technology since the original moon landings, what are your thoughts on the authenticity of more recent exploration? Do you think they were fake too?
Well, they can't be trusted. Absolutely, they can't be trusted. I mean, how can you? The criminals are, it's like a child molester who keeps being pardoned over and over and over and over again, and then you're asking them to babysit your children, and they promise they've repented. I mean, how can they be trusted? They haven't come forward and admitted that they've sinned and done wrong. And they, just a few years later, allegedly sent probes to Mars. Well, those Mars pictures look a lot like a telescope in Hawaii. The background, the rocks are the same. I saw a clip of somebody up there saying, hey, this looks just like the Mars pictures. Oh, how about that? The most recent probes, they line up mountain for mountain. They trace over each other for areas of Greenland. So they can't be trusted, can they? And this whole idea about a face on Mars or a pyramid on Mars, if I may remind people, these are coming from the same folks who fake pictures on the moon. What if these are clever people? They fake pictures of faces and pyramids on Mars and they leak them out and they try to cover it up to make it look real. It's called street cred, giving it credibility, right? They have a guy touring the news shows 6 months ago saying UFOs are real, aliens are real. And when pressed on the issue, did you see a UFO spacecraft in these hangars you're talking about? Well, no. Did you see one of these aliens you're talking about that they have? Well, no. Someone told me they're real. And Fox News considers that a good source, right? So they're promoting aliens, right? And UFOs, they're promoting that, but they're hiding the moon landing fraud. So it seems like they're hiding the truth and promoting lies. And von Braun, before he died, he said the United States federal government is going to fake an alien invasion. How
I
about
didn't
that?
know that. Wow,
Yep.
I didn't know that.
You see that?
But what is
And
the point of doing this? I don't get it. Like, why
well,
fake that?
I'm not sure. I guess it's like the moon landing fraud, multiple benefits to evil people. They embezzled the money. They gained control over people. They were probably surprised how easily they got away with it. I mean, Richard Nixon, right, was not at the launch to go to the moon the first time. You understand that? World leaders were there. The whole world is watching. And Richard Nixon chooses not to go because he knew it was fake. And what if the truth came out a few days later? You see, then for all time, there'd be a picture of him smiling and shaking Neil Armstrong's hand at the launch site. He literally distanced himself until they got away with it. Then he shows up for the second launch. The second launch you show up for, not the debut one, when all the world leaders are there except the guy from the country that's doing it, you see. And so they got away with it. And then they're like, oh, well, this is easy to fool the people. They can get away with it again and get embezzle money and lie. They had complete media control. One of the interactive video links in my book at Sibrel.com, and you can see those links now, is Dan Rather describing for. They didn't show the Zapruder film until like 10 years later, 12 years later. So CBS News says, trust us. We'll describe it for you. And then Dan Rather says out of his mouth, and then the third and fatal shot, you can see Kennedy's head go violently forward, where the video clips has it synchronized with the Zapruder film, where his head goes violently backwards, meaning the bullet came from the front, but that contradicts the patsy Oswald. So CBS News said the exact opposite of the truth. And they saw the Zapruder film. They intentionally said the exact opposite of the truth about the Kennedy assassination. You see? So they controlled everything. There was a survey, I think I mentioned it in the book. Some independent company, nonprofit, did a survey of 1,500 publications, newspapers, magazines, whatever. How many are for, Chavez or whoever it was in South America, the CIA overthrowing? Who's for the CIA overthrowing this guy? All 1,500 said that's a great idea. Not a single one. They had control over everything. Every TV and newspaper and radio said Oswald did it, which is a lie. Every TV station, radio station said men were on the moon, which is a lie. And every TV station, every newspaper, every magazine said something about this event that happened 3 years ago. I wonder if that's the truth or not. You see, they're training us like a dog to believe these lies, and it gave them that great ambition. Why would they fake an alien invasion? Maybe it has something to do with falsifying the coming of the Messiah. Who knows? One of the articles at Sibrel.com is Are Aliens Real? It took me hundreds of hours to write, research, and edit. And the top two UFO people, and the names I should have known, but they're in there. The one's French, one's American. They've researched UFOs for 40 years, alien abductions and all that stuff. They both came to the same conclusion, independent of one another. Number one, UFOs are real. Number two, they're not from outer space, they're from Earth. Number three, they're demonic. Now get this program, which I thought was a one-time TV special, I didn't know it was like a 3-year program with multiple episodes. Ancient Aliens. Ancient Aliens. You know what Ancient Aliens says? There was this medical study about 20 years ago called the Eve Project. It took 10 years to do, right? Some medicines are approved in less than a year somehow. But just to, study this stuff, they took blood samples from every nationality. Hawaiians, Eskimos, Africans, Swedes, everybody. And then with DNA technology, they're able to go back in time, all the way back in humanity, where the number of people on Earth keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And you know what they concluded? Absolutely scientifically proven. All humans on Earth who are alive today, whoever will be alive and whoever lived, came from one woman, just like the Bible says. And no one before her, no evolution, suddenly appeared. They can't deny that, but they can't say there's a God either. That means they have to repent of their sin. So how can we say that there's no God because we all came from one woman, like the Bible says, and no one before her, she just suddenly showed up? Sounds like creation to me. aliens made her. That's right, aliens made her. So they say aliens seeded Earth, right? And that's why one woman disappears. Not the Bible, not God, not aliens. Well, I mean, I think if I were in the third grade, maybe it's just me, I would ask them, which they've never apparently answered in 3.5 years. Okay, if we were made by aliens, then who made the aliens? You see? And if you read, I think it's Isaiah chapter 14, it says that Lucifer, fallen angel, wants to become God, wants to take the place of God. Well, if aliens are really fallen angels, and if the leader of fallen angels is really Lucifer, then what they're really saying is that mankind was made by Lucifer instead of God. That's what they're saying. See that? Now, God is a God of love, and I love everybody. And to me, one of the most profound things that proves to me that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah is one thing that he said: love your enemies. Now, the Muslims are bombing the Jews, and the Jews are bombing the Muslims, and the Christian United States is bombing everybody else. No one's loving their enemy, are they? It says feed your enemy, give them water. Who's doing that? So I think this guy is not from planet Earth, and it's not planet Pluto. I think it's from heaven. So he said, love your enemy, love your enemy. That's what we need to do. And God doesn't like murdering and stealing and all those other things. He gives people the opportunity their whole life to change, like I'm doing every day, to become more godly and less sinful. And so I guess the primary thing, it seems, about a fake alien invasion would be, and I know it sounds odd, but it is what it is, to worship Lucifer. And then we all know on this channel and other channels like this, the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group, Council of Foreign Relations, and blah, 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 blah. These are the people around the world, right? Well, I was looking at the logo of the World Economic Forum not too long ago. And of course, this is a $1 billion organization with many billionaires. So they could spend $1 billion on their logo if they wanted to. And there's an O in world, there's an O in economic, and there's an O in forum. And they have them kind of off-centered, and they have this kind of C going through all three O's. And if you look, hidden in plain sight, the half circle going through one O forms a 6, and the other one is a 6, and the other one is a 6. Literally, their logo is 666. And then their spokesperson said, don't follow Jesus. He said that. Don't follow the Bible. Never said there wasn't a God. Never said there wasn't a Lucifer. Just said, don't follow the Bible that says repent, and don't follow Jesus of Nazareth, who says love your enemy and repent. You see that? And they literally have 666 in their logo. And they're not the only ones who have 666 in their logo. Google has 666 in their logo. And CERN, trying to get down to the smallest particle, which I think means to enter the other dimension. Where did the guy say aliens came from? Planet Earth, multidimensional, you see? And maybe they're trying to let fallen angels in or something, and they'll claim that they're aliens, right? I think that's got to be it. I know it sounds odd to say that the world is run by people who worship Lucifer, but so is raping children odd. And that happens all the time. I mean, it just boggles my mind when I hear these statistics about human slavery. You know how many children go missing every year in America? Just America, 500,000 every year, 500,000. Every 10 years, 5 million children go missing. In the last 50 years, there's 25 million children go missing. Where are they? I mean, who's doing, what are these kidnappers doing to them, right? And then you have, I mean, what's the most honorable organization supposed to be on earth? The priesthood. And who has more lawsuits against child molestation than anybody? The priesthood, right? So how do we know Child Protective Services and the police aren't involved? Not all of them, of course, but a few aren't into that business. And then when a film comes out about this to expose it, the media is criticizing a film trying to bring light to children being kidnapped and molested. They're criticizing such a film. Wow. And these are the people who run the world, who run those publications, right? So all I can say is what Peter said, save yourself from this corrupt generation. And what good is it to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul, right? It's not my favorite scripture, but it's my most important one, right? That's it. What was that TV show? Futurama, right? Made by the guy who made The Simpsons. Took me a while to get into that show, but my favorite character is Bender, the kleptomaniac robot. And he's always calling his coworkers meatbags, they're gonna die, ha ha ha, and I'll live on forever. Because if I'm run over by a steamroller, they just pop out my memory cartridge and pop it in a new robot, I'm good to go. And then his owner says, well, Bender, got some bad news. You're early model, you don't have a removable memory cartridge. So when you go, you go. And then he's like, well, how long have I got? Maybe just 10,000 years. And it's like, well, and then what? And then he says something very profound. Anything less than immortality is a complete waste of time. That is profound. You see, unless we make it, unless we survive judgment, and that's another thing reading the Bible convinced me of. A judgment just makes sense. We are judged, right? And not in the book. That man who confessed that we, faked the moon landing, that wasn't the first thing out of his mouth. He said, as he's dying, fearing the judgment of God. And as best as we know, if you confess your sin and make a pledge not to do it again, you're forgiven. King David murdered people to cover up his adultery, but he repented. And as best as we know, he's in heaven or will be in heaven. And so this guy says, as he's dying, that he's a murderer. That's what he says first, a murderer. His son, who's there, says, Dad, who did you kill? He said, well, I was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. I checked with his son. He lived right across from Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico. He said, well, they brought in all this, fake lunar soil and a fake lunar module, and they put two airplane hangars together and they created a fake lunar background. President Johnson was there. He gave me a list of people who'd let in and nobody else, and they filmed the moon landing there. And my coworker thought it was morally wrong. He said he's going to tell a reporter. We were told if we tell anybody, they'll kill us, and so I killed him to cover it up. The military police came in to investigate it. And then they said, well, first, who you killed. And when they said why, he said, well, this is why, to cover up the moon landing fraud. You don't make that up as you're dying. You see, more important to him was that he was a murderer. He had to confess that. Why he did it didn't really matter to him. It just happened to be to cover up the fake news. We published that list in the book. We have a list of 15 people who were there. Some of these people are still alive, some of whom I've talked to, even before I published the list to warn them that the book was coming out. And this is what they're so scared about. They did fake the moon landing. It's not a theory. And if you had cancer, I don't know about you, I would want to know. I would want to know if I had a week to live or a month to live or a year to live. I'd want to know. And an American needs to know. Glenn Beck needs to know. And I believe he would admit he's wrong. I think he's sincere. But, that's what was so heartbreaking. I believe the guy's sincere. I don't agree with everything he says. I just believe he's sincere. And for a sincere person to be so led astray and ridiculing the truth and defending murderers, just a knife in my heart. And of course, I've made mistakes too. But we have to know this has to come out. You can't have a great awakening about everything else and still trust the federal government about the moon landing. That's still murderers on the loose. And we outnumber them. That's why they're trying to distract us with television. People spend more time watching television than they do at work. Do you realize that? What is that? 40 times 2 is 80. That's 160 hours a week at work, and people spend 200 hours, I mean, a month at work and 200 hours a month watching television. How's there time to change the world? There isn't. And so how did people believe the moon landings are real when they weren't? Television, right? And that's what they did. Fooled me, right?
So have you ever seen the astronauts? I think I watched a film that talked about them actually being underwater and you can see the air bubbles and they're on strings. Have you ever seen that?
I've seen things like that. A lot of that is promoted by people who think the Earth is flat, or at least they claim that's what they think. That's just to discredit people who know the moon landings are fake. I mean, do a moon landing fraud search. Half the ones that come out are about flat Earth. They're trying to make you look crazy if you say the federal government is corrupt enough to fake the moon landing, which they are, and more so. So, I mean, I've traveled halfway around the world and I say to people, what do you do, filmmaker? What's your famous film? Moon landings are fake. They say, oh, and you think the Earth is flat. You see how successful it is? So I think the Earth is round. I don't think it matters. The Earth could be a triangle. It's still about the corrupt federal government. That's the issue, not geography. See, they're trying to discredit people. However, it does appear that they have faked space station missions. Now, why would they do that? Maybe the space station isn't there anymore. I mean, they plan to, quote, crash it intentionally, allegedly, in 2029, the year an asteroid's going to show up and likely hit the Earth. Little side note. So I think they're going to fake it crashing and use it for something else. I think there's probably 2 or 3 space stations up there, and something happened to the one that they claim they're going to. It's maybe they pushed it into outer space. Maybe it crashed and they're too embarrassed to tell us. Who knows? But NASA obviously can't be trusted, right? I think satellites do exist. I think the Earth is round, and I think you can send probes into outer space. You can X-ray a toaster 1,000 times; it'll still make toast for you. But you can't X-ray a human 1,000 times and expect them to live well. And that's why they still can't go to the moon. I mean, their latest mission, they said in 2014 they were going to have people orbiting the moon in 2018. They were 100% behind schedule. Instead of 4 years, it took 8 years to have mannequins orbit the moon. They couldn't even have people. So why is it so dangerous going to the moon that only mannequins can orbit? But somehow, with 1 millionth computing power of a cell phone ahead of schedule on the first attempt, you can play golf and drive cars on the moon. Oh, how about that? And so this period of faking that they postponed, swept under the rug, let another administration have to deal with the truth coming out, it's upon us. And now they are having to deal with this obviousness that you cannot have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than you can today. Why can they drive cars on the moon in 1969, but they can't even have humans orbit the moon? What's the problem? And of course, as you know, one of the clips you can see for free at Sibrel.com is Kelly Smith saying there's dangerous radiation on a trip to the moon, that the technology to survive such a trip has not been invented yet. Then how did they go to the moon before and not get killed? You see, and the footage I uncovered is them faking being halfway to the moon. They're faking being halfway to the moon, which means they can't go halfway, which means they can't leave Earth orbit then, and they obviously can't leave Earth orbit now. Otherwise, there'd be people orbiting the moon instead of mannequins, right?
Do you think that so they've never had any human go to the moon at all since or ever at
No,
all?
no.
Nothing.
Mhm.
Do you think we've been to the moon just with, I don't know, those probes
Yeah,
and things like
I
that?
think there are unmanned probes. on the moon. There are some there by China. There's some there by Russia, and there are probably some there by the United States. They sent them prior to the faking of the moon mission so that they could take pictures of the surface and maybe gather lunar samples or something like that. That's how they faked the moon rocks. One moon rock, though, I talked about this, was opened from a hermetically sealed container, and it was proved to be a fake. So this is a rock that Neil Armstrong said out of his own mouth he personally picked up, put in his pocket, and gave to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. They put it in a hermetically sealed box. My film comes out. The curator's curious. He opens it up, puts it under a microscope, and it's petrified wood. So no reporter, even though they did a story, moon rock proves to be fake. Comment from NASA, no comment. Okay, so the moon rocks are fake. What about the moon mission? No one asked that. The Washington Post does a story. Isn't it interesting? On the 25th anniversary or whatever it was, some people don't believe we go to the moon. They call me up, do an interview, watch my movie. And I'm like, okay, did you see the footage of them faking being halfway to the moon? Yeah. What do you got to say about that? Well, it looks like they're faking being halfway to the moon. I said, yeah, how about that? And I said, why don't you do a story about how, well, maybe they really did fake the moon landing? He says, if I did that, I would be fired. You see, NBC won't broadcast it. The Washington Post won't do it, or they'll be fired. I even had USA Today write a review of my movie without watching the movie. Can you understand that? We have a reporter writing a review of a film that they did not watch because I called them up and I said, "How come you didn't talk about this footage I uncovered about them faking being halfway to the moon?" "Oh, is that in the movie?" "Yeah, did you watch the movie?" "Well, no." I said, "Oh, you mean you wrote a review of my movie without watching it?" I said, "Yeah, I wrote it on the concept of your movie." That's a reporter for the USA Today writing a nationally published review of a film that they didn't watch. It's only 45 minutes long. I guess that must have interrupted Seinfeld, I suppose. What can you
It's
do?
too much. So I want to ask you, reflecting on your high-profile encounters, such as with Buzz Aldrin, how do you think these moments have influenced public perception of your work and the broader conversation of the moon landings? Do you think that maybe affected anything or no?
Oh, definitely. It was a lot of free publicity. I should have sent Buzz a box of cigars. Thank you, Buzz, for punching me. It was great publicity. Well, it's both. I get hate email because of it. How dare you say that the moon landings are fake? They're heroes. Well, how sad is that? Our heroes are a bunch of liars. That's our country. That's the world, right? But then other people say, obviously, he didn't go. I mean, the second film, Astronauts Gone Wild, is me confronting them with the fake footage or with the Bible, saying, swear to God you walked on the moon, or here's the fake footage. That's where we left a microphone inside a guy's house by accident and forgot to turn off the camera, where you hear him and his son plotting my assassination by the CIA, which wouldn't be necessary if they really went to the moon. I'm some silly person who thinks it was done in a TV studio. Why would the CIA care, right? So a lot of people see the punch and say, yeah, why would he act like that? I mean, if I walked on the moon and someone thought I didn't, I would think that was hysterically funny. I would say, sure, I'll swear on the Bible. Would two or three Bibles stacked on top of one another, would that help you? Are you okay? I got a doctor you could go to. You okay? You okay? Come here. Sit down. Are you okay? I would find it funny. But it's like me walking up to him in front of his wife and saying, "Oh, your mistress says hello." He's mad because it's true. The fact is, a sword with no point causes no injury. It has a point because it's the truth. That's why he reacted that way. Some people see that crystal clear. Other people see I'm offending the honor of America, saying their great accomplishment was a lie. Now, how ironic is that? Mankind's greatest accomplishment, the alleged greatest nation on earth, greatest accomplishment, is a complete fraud. That's the world that we live in, and that's the leadership that we have. Whether you recognize it or not, it doesn't change the facts.
Yeah, I agree. Good note to end on.
Yeah,
Do
and
you, yeah,
I
I
was
was
just
going to
saying the
ask
moon
you,
landing rod is just the epitome of the fallenness of the world. Go ahead with your question, Mia.
last question, I was going to say, what new projects or any other investigation that you're currently excited about? Something you're
I
doing?
I hope to never produce a documentary ever again. I mean, they're fun. They're fun to watch, to hit play and watch someone else's hard work, but it's so tedious just to edit. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. 45-minute film. I spent up to 4,000 hours editing a 45-minute film. That's 2 years at 40 hours a week. And so then the research and went over the script. I probably edited the script 50 times, maybe 100 times. And the book, 15 years to write, 2 years to edit. So tedious to do nonfiction. I want to do fiction. And I've written an inspirational feature film. I hope, to produce someday, or actually someone else produce and me direct. Maybe that'll happen. We got a $5 million budget. We have a couple of well-known Hollywood actors who want to be in it and or produce it. We're just waiting for some benevolent person to give us $5 million. So maybe we'll do that next. I hope to do fiction and never go back to the moon landing ever again. So Illuminati, if you're out there, you want me to stop blabbering about the moon landing fraud, help me make my movie, and I'll never talk about it ever again.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Bart. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun listening to you and talk. It's great.
Well, bless you, Mia, and the work of your hands, and everyone watching and listening. Just go to Sibrel.com if you want to get the book in audio, Kindle, or print, or just watch the links. There's 17 interactive links. I write a chapter, say go to link 1, link 2. All those links are at Sibrel.com. You can watch them for free.
And that brings us to an end of another episode of the Sensible Hippie podcast. And as we wrap up today's episode on the moon landing theories, I want to remind everyone the importance of questioning and critical assessing all sides of a story. Our discussion today is just a starting point. I encourage all of you to continue exploring, asking questions, and seeking out diverse source of information. Remember, the pursuit of knowledge is never straightforward, and every story has more than one facet. And to all of my listeners, your support means the world to me. If you've enjoyed our journey today, please head over to your favorite podcast platform and leave a positive review. It helps more people to find us and help to grow our growing Ohana. And to all of my YouTube Ohana, thank you so much for your support. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe. Your curiosity and support make these conversations possible and ever so rewarding. Our Ohana is growing, and I want to thank you for that. Until the next time, keep questioning the narratives. After all, one step for mankind might just be one giant leap for mankind's mysteries. Bye.